There's a power struggle between the US Congress and the Pentagon over the rate and extent of disclosures concerning UFOs. A fleet of UFOs was seen coming out of a Mexico volcano. Alien entities continue to be seen in Peru. The first whistleblower discussing reverse engineering projects concerning recovered spacecraft is interviewed. John Lear revelations, Elena Danaan on the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and the Anunnaki revelations concerning the Lahaina firefight, and a UAP website has been finally released.
You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome to the September 2nd edition of Exopolitics Today, the week in review, and it has been quite an eventful week. I mean, this is the final week of summer, and next week we are going to have the US Congress reconvening, and there has been some action concerning the Congress and the Pentagon and whistleblower revelations that we're going to be covering. So let me begin by bringing up my Twitter feed. And so with the very first story I want to cover is an article in the Liberation Times that spells out this power struggle between the US Congress and the Pentagon and the intelligence community over UFO disclosure. It is becoming clear, and the article does a very good job in explaining the different entities, official entities that were set up to discuss or investigate UFOs, and that there is a battle between the Congress and the Pentagon and the intelligence community over just how much to reveal, which is probably not so much of a big surprise, but this article is very helpful for just understanding the very origins of the different entities that were created, going back to 2020 with the creation of a UAP task force by the US Navy that appeared to be sincere in wanting to get to the bottom of what was really going on, revealing information. And that is the organization that this whistleblower, David Grusch, is associated with. That's where he learned about what was really happening with all these reverse engineering programs. Then the next organization that replaced that naval UAP group was the AIMSOG, which is a very difficult to remember acronym concerning the UFO issue. So this article describes the history of how these different organizations investigating UFOs were created, and why it was that one organization was more involved in transparency than another, and the different acts of Congress that were passed that were intended to establish or create greater authority for these different organizations. So this article in the Liberation Times is definitely well worth reading, just so that you can find out a little more clearly which organizations that have been created recently in the Pentagon and authorized by the US Congress were more intent on disclosure versus those that were wanting to create a kind of bureaucratic minefield where there wouldn't be that much disclosure. So that article, Liberation Times, definitely I thought was very good in giving an overview. So this is the video of 20 or more UFOs coming out of this volcano in Mexico, Popocatépetl. My pronunciation is probably not very good for that. And it's very instructive to kind of see this. So let me just play it for you. We can see how it looks. So these 20 UFOs coming out of the volcano. So here you can see it playing. Now, just recently, here we go. So now you can see the volcano, you can see the ash, and now you see the first UFO coming out. And pretty soon you're going to have quite a few more. So this was recorded on August 24 of this year, and there you have it. These UFOs are coming out in quick succession. So this is not unique to Mexico. I mean, Mexico has had quite a number of videos taken of UFOs coming out of this volcano. Now, this is a live camera feed from the volcano. So this is official footage from the Mexican government. So this is not CGI. This is not someone just having fun trying to fool us. This is official camera footage, a webcam that's associated with volcanologists studying activity on the Popocatépetl volcano there in Mexico. So where do they come from? I think it's quite clear. There's an underground base there in Mexico, and under that volcano, the UFOs that have been seen coming out of that volcano, they obviously can deal with the temperatures. They are able to withstand the pressures, the temperatures formed by lava fields. So exactly what is underneath the volcano? Probably a spaceport of some kind. And for those that have been following my updates from JP, or JP's updates, he's described visiting several spaceports, one in the United States and one in the South Atlantic. And these spaceports are filled with spacecraft either belonging to extraterrestrial visitors or to inner Earth civilizations. So very significant and he was saying that the news he was getting was that these spaceports would be allowing more of their craft to be witnessed. So those were spaceports that he visited in the US South and in the South Atlantic. But here you got one coming out of Popocatépetl volcano in Mexico. Okay, so here's the Peruvian village that had the alleged alien attacks in July. There continues to be incidents where aliens are flying silently and are being sighted. So in the latest incident, this was from August 27 that this was posted, and the incident happened 2 days earlier, so we can assume it happened on August 25th, where two villagers from San Antonio saw strange light phenomena, like a person in silhouette flying around 20 feet high, and then being shot at. This figure, this being landed on a beach, was shot at, and then an object came out from there and went into space. So that just shows that whatever's happening in Peru is continuing, that it wasn't just a matter of several attacks that had happened in July around the time that the US military began joint exercises with the Peruvian military, and that the US Space Force was involved at the time that the attacks began, that these attacks are continuing. Well, at the very least, the sightings are continuing. There wasn't an attack with this particular incident, but nevertheless, it is interesting that this is going on still in Peru. So here's a video interview I did with Stan Deyo. And Stan Deyo is a very interesting whistleblower. He was an a U.S. Air Force cadet. Then he was drummed out of the Air Force Academy on some kind of concocted charge or some sort of ethics violation that he explains in the video and that is explained elsewhere. And he then got recruited into an American reverse engineering program to build electrogravitic craft. Stan was, while at the Air Force, developing his own ideas concerning electrogravitic propulsion. And so that brought him to the attention of certain figures. He was drummed out of the Air Force Academy and then recruited into a program, some program concerning novel reverse engineering using electrogravitics. Dr. Edward Teller was involved in that. He was the head of the project. This was being run out of Texas, and for some reason he was recruited also by the FBI, so he was an FBI asset. But to cut a long story short, worth going to the video to find all the details of what happened to him was that he went to Australia, he escaped to Australia, and he was given a letter of recommendation to basically become involved in a similar electrogravitic reverse engineering program in Australia. So I got to find out what the Australians were doing in this regard. There was an assassination attempt on him. And then eventually in 1977, he decided, rather than continue to hide, that the best strategy was to go public. And he did it in a spectacular way. He was featured in a major news story that was published by one of the major networks in Australia, Channel 9 News, or Channel 9. And they put out a video of focusing on his revelations. And they all checked out. I mean, he does have the background. He's got documentation that substantiates that he was working where he claims to have been working, and he knew the people that he claims. And so, fascinating interview that shows that these reverse engineering programs, that the first whistleblower testimonies about these programs continuing date back to the 1970s. And this is the first person to come forward and talk about this. So Stan Deyo is, as far as I understand, the first whistleblower talking about reverse engineering programs involving recovered extraterrestrial spacecraft. Now, of course, we know David Grusch has talked about up to 40 people that he could identify that could talk to Congress about current reverse engineering programs. Stan Deyo is talking about a reverse engineering program that dates back to the 1970s in Australia. And so that tells us that these reverse engineering programs have been going on for, at the very least, 50 years now. Of course, I've interviewed people like William Tompkins, who says that these programs actually go back to the 1950s, and that Douglas Aircraft Company was very prominent in this, as was the RAND project, or the RAND Corporation, as it's called today. So, yeah, a little bit of history there. Here's another very early witness. Now, John Lear wasn't a whistleblower insofar as he talked about his experiences. He emerged in the 1980s with the Bob Lazar story. But in 1987, he did his very first interview with George Knapp at the local television network there in Nevada. And he discussed what he knew about these different reverse engineering programs and what was happening at different places. Interestingly, John Lear, he believes that 90% of extraterrestrials are hostile, which is a very interesting figure. And to my mind, that figure is grossly exaggerated and is very likely CIA propaganda. And it's very interesting how these early whistleblowers, well, John Lear wasn't a whistleblower, he was a researcher. He thought that the ETs were hostile. Stan Deyo, he thought, he believes that the extraterrestrials are deceptive. And Stan Deyo, in our interview, he talked about a deception, a coming great deception involving these alien visitors, something like in the movie V, or in the television series V. For those that haven't watched it, the V series, the first series came out in the 1980s, and then there was a rerun. A new series came out in the 2000s, and both depicted very attractive-looking extraterrestrials showing up, but they were actually deceptive because they were camouflage. They were actually reptilian-looking extraterrestrials in camouflage. So that's, pardon me, that's very interesting that both John Lear and Stan Deyo have this very dim view of extraterrestrials as being negative. And I will talk a little bit more about that later. So John Lear, very interesting personality, going back to the 80s, but he was also very prominent in putting out information concerning these reverse engineering programs, going back to the 1980s. And of course, Bob Lazar, he was very involved in that. So here's a very significant story. And this is an article that was released by Elena Danaan, where she talks about Prince Ea, who is also known as Enki, that he was he had information about the Lahaina fires. And Thorhan, the High Commander with the Galactic Federation of Worlds, also had things to say. So Elena says that she was taken to the flagship of the Nibiru, of the Anunnaki, which is commanded by Prince Ea, and she was told about what was really going on with the Lahaina fires. So I don't want to talk too much about that, because on YouTube you need to be very careful when you're talking about mass events that involve death, and this being a false flag attack. But she talks about this actually involving stealth satellites that possess directed energy weapons, that this was a land grab, and that these are small young people, if euphemism there, that small young people were taken away. So that's the information she got from her sources, and soon after that, she just experienced a kind of wave of attacks, so much that she decided to take the article, the video down from Rumble, and just have people go to her website, because the hostile attacks on Rumble were just too much for her. So she decided to take it down. You can still watch the video, but you have to go to her website and go to this article. So you just go to elenadanaan.org and you can watch the video presentation that she did. Well worth watching. And Thorhan Eredian comes up with similar information in the article. So well worth taking a look at that. It gives an extraterrestrial perspective on what happened in Lahaina, which corroborates what a lot of independent researchers are finding out, speaking to people on the ground, people who have suffered as a direct result of the involvement of organizations, major organizations, in buying up land in Lahaina, and of course the spectacular failings like water supply being turned off, the alarm system not going off. So yeah, definitely worth reading that if you want to get another perspective of what happened in Lahaina. So now, okay, so here's a news story that I just wanted to comment on. The title says it all. It comes out in the Debrief. The Debrief is the news magazine, or news zine, I think they call it, the news magazine that discussed or first introduced the testimony of David Grusch to the public, to the general public. So this is a story by one of their journalists, Micah Hanks. And it says, pilot UFO sightings collected by NASA reveal serious safety concerns over objects in US airspace. So this is very interesting, just how the UFO issue is being framed as more and more stories get into the mainstream. It's being framed in terms of UFOs being a serious safety concern, being a national security threat. And of course, you have to look back and say, well, why is this happening now? Why is it all of a sudden, since 2017, UFOs are being considered a national security threat and a serious safety concern in the air, whereas in the previous 50, 60 years, there were lots of UFO sightings by pilots, both Air Force pilots, Navy pilots, civilian pilots, and it was never considered to be a safety concern or a national security threat. Quite the opposite. But now it's gone to the other extreme. So you have to ask yourself, well, how many aircraft have crashed because these UFOs, UAPs, have gotten in the way, been a flight hazard, gotten in the way and brought these craft down. The only incidents I've heard of, and this is historically documented, is when US Air Force pilots were instructed to shoot down UFOs. That's when there were a significant number of aircraft crashes. And that happened in the 1940s under President Truman into the early 50s. And then someone kind of realized that this wasn't a good idea. And they stopped. And there's a lot of data on that I do cover that in one of my books, the US Space Force. So I discuss that history. Or you can go to the US Air Force Secret Space Program, where I talk about the US Air Force policy in the 40s under Truman to shoot down UFOs. But aside from that, there haven't been cases of UFOs bringing down Navy, Air Force jets or civilian jets. So now all of a sudden they're considered a serious safety concern. So right away, if you smell a rat, then I think your nose is spot on. There's something definitely going on there. Okay, so here's a interview I did with Elena Marzulli, who has done a lot of research on giants and on the Nephilim. Now, he takes the approach that the Nephilim described in the book of Genesis in the Bible, and also in the book of Enoch, in these ancient texts, biblical texts, that these Nephilim were also called giants. And they were, of course, very, very large. So he's actually done quite a lot of research on the giants. He's done field work. He's gone to Peru and other places and has put together, I think he's produced 27 films on various issues related to giants and the Nephilim. And also he's written 13 books on various aspects of the Nephilim. So he's very concerned about the giants and the Nephilim. And what became clear in our interview towards the very end is that he has used the UFO abduction research as developing an analytical framework for understanding the nexus between giants, UFOs, extraterrestrial life. And his overview is pretty alarming. It's similar to what I mentioned earlier when I talked about Stan Deo's analysis, John Lear's analysis that over 90% of UFOs are alien extraterrestrials. Elena Marzulli believes that there's a UFO deception coming, and it'll be similar to what Stan Deo described, something where you're going to have very attractive looking extraterrestrials showing up and trying to convince the world public that they are here in peace, that they want to help humanity's evolution, and they're willing to share advanced technologies to achieve that goal, thereby ending hunger, poverty, energy problems, ending environmental pollution, and so forth. So he believes that this is a deception. And I think it's a very important issue. I believe that there are different extraterrestrial human-looking groups out there, and some of them are deceptive and some of them are not. And you see this in historical texts like the Book of Enoch, where you have both positive and negative angels. When they talk about the angels, I believe they're talking about these different extraterrestrial groups, some of whom look very, very human. Some are positive, some are negative. And of course, I interviewed Timothy Alberino several times now, and he thinks that the proportion of positive angels or positive extraterrestrials to negative angels or negative extraterrestrials is about two-thirds to one-third. And, fair enough. I think that is kind of pretty correct, that the vast majority of extraterrestrials are benevolent and they are here to help. So when you look at this data, people saying that that the extraterrestrials are uniformly negative, then I think we need to really engage with that, present the information, the research. Because I think people like researchers like L.A. Marzulli, they have relied a lot on the abduction research of David Jacobs. And David Jacobs definitely was a very good researcher. And he put together hundreds of case studies of people being abducted and abused in a genetic program by these alien grey extraterrestrials. And I don't quibble with anything David Jacobs has said. In fact, I agree with a lot of what he has said, that the hybridization experiment was very real. It is happening. Where I disagree is that David Jacobs did not examine the contactee data. He never did. He relied on abduction research, people experiencing these encounters with grey extraterrestrials, missing time, genetic experiments, having sperm and ovum extracted, being asked to nurse hybrid children that were created from the genetic experiments involving their sperm or ova. So, that's what David Jacobs covered, and that's fine because that has been going on. So I have no problem with that research. But what David Jacobs didn't do was that he didn't cover the contactee research, where you had these friendly, human-looking extraterrestrials that were here to help humanity evolve spiritually, ethically, technologically, but that they were saying consistently that our governments, our militaries in particular, were weaponizing any technology that they would share, even positive technology for health concerns and healing and so forth, would be weaponized. So they stopped revealing the technologies and were having contacts. And I've been working with dozens of contactees. Some of them have a lot of good data. We're talking about photographs, video of the craft that they were involved in. Are you talking about footprints in the multiple witness reports? A lot of abductees don't have that. I mean, sure, you have a lot of abductees. There's a lot more people claiming to be abductees. But when you look at the quality of the evidence is on the side of contactees, those having contacts with positive human-looking extraterrestrials. So I think it's very important that people, L.A. Marzulli, people, Standeo, others that do look at the abduction research and believe that that is a sign of what lies ahead, that they look also at the contactee research and the data from that, because that gives us the contrary perspective, and that way we can come up with a much more nuanced, much more balanced understanding of what's going on, and we can make informed decisions. And I believe that's my role. That's my job as a political scientist, professional political scientist. Before I got involved in this UFO research, I was doing teaching classes in international peace and conflict resolution at School of International Service at American University in Washington, D.C., and that was my job, to present the data so that policymakers could make informed choices, because that's the problem. If people come up and say, no, there's no such thing as positive extraterrestrials, they're all evil demonic entities and they're here to deceive us and take everything away from us, what you're doing is you're excluding a lot of data. And when you do that, then you have skewed policy choices that are presented to policymakers, or in this case, to the general public. So my job is to present all the data, and I'm very glad that Stan Deyo, L.A. Marzulli are willing to be interviewed and to have this contrary data presented so that way they can then come up with, I think, a much more well-rounded analysis of what is going on and what deception lies ahead of us. Because I think there is a deception coming involving extraterrestrials. I agree with that. Exactly how that deception is going to be played out, that is where we really need to look at all of the data and be prepared, because the deep state does involve some very clever, crafty individuals with advanced stealth technologies where they can pull off some very nasty surprises. So, yeah, definitely we need to look at all of the data. Okay, so here's an overview of the pushback that has been coming against David Grusch's testimony on captured non-human UFOs and reverse engineering programs. So this is an interview featuring Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, where they discuss. Oh, sorry. This involves Ross Coulter and Bryce Zabel, where they discuss this pushback concerning the testimony of David Grusch. The video goes for 45 minutes, and it's well worth looking at this, and because it talks about efforts by some members of Congress to stop future UFO hearings. So that groundbreaking hearing on UFOs that occurred on August 26 before the House Oversight Subcommittee for National Security, that type of hearing where whistleblowers would come in and talk about what they saw or experienced, that those kinds of hearings would be stopped and everything would be filtered through the ARROW office. That's the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is set up to deal with that. Now, there is a problem with the ARROW office as it's currently being led by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. It appears that there have been a number of whistleblowers that have confided in him or that have shared their testimony of what's going on, and none of that has emerged in the public domain. In fact, Sean Kirkpatrick has made it very clear that he has come across no evidence of non-human technologies or life being in the possession of any government or corporate entity. So he is pouring cold water on claims of those like David Grusch. And there are members of Congress that are trying to stop this. But in this video, in this presentation by Bryce Zabel and Ross Coulter, they describe who's involved in that and why this proposed UAP legislation, which has been incorporated into the National Defense Authorization Act for 2024, that's called the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure Act for 2023, that was passed unanimously by the Senate, incorporated as an amendment into the National Defense Authorization Act for 2024, that is groundbreaking because it creates this National Archives Review Board that is going to spearhead the declassification and release of UAP records older than 25 years. So that's definitely important legislation, and there are people trying to stop that, but nevertheless, that legislation is coming forward. So different factions are trying to maneuver themselves in this disclosure battle. Okay, so here's something I wanted to discuss that I think is very significant. Now, I mentioned Elena Danaan already concerning this article that she wrote and the video presentation she did about the Lahaina fire, the information she got from Ia and from Thorhen Aredian. Now, it's significant that a day after that report, she was attacked. She experienced a physical attack using a directed energy weapon that knocked her unconscious for about 30 minutes, and she has a scar on her head, and she took a photo of that, and she supplied that photo. And as I said, the article that she did earlier, that it concerned Lahaina, what was involved in that. So this is very significant because she experienced not just a physical attack, but also character attacks. And there was a witness, someone who calls himself, not quite sure what he calls himself, but he claims that he is in touch or supporting one of the Anunnaki, Enlil, and that he claims that Elena Danaan was killed and replaced by a droid. This person continues to make that outlandish, stupid comment with zero evidence. And what really puzzles me is that there are researchers, not quite researchers, the Patriot community, people in the Patriot community who have given this person airtime, have publicized his view. They've never asked Elena Danaan on, who Elena is a professional archaeologist. She has an education. She worked professionally in the field of archaeology for close to 20 years. She documents her sightings, her revelations, and presents supporting evidence. And I've come up with supporting evidence. But they don't ask Elena to be interviewed. They ask people like this person coming forward with these character attacks on her, saying she was murdered. So I think I believe there is a coordinated psychological operation happening, involving different intelligence agencies that are targeting Elena Danaan, that are targeting people that are supporting her. And the reason I think is very clear. They do not want the public to know that there are friendly extraterrestrials that are wanting to make contact. What they want the public to know about is that there are these enigmatic grey extraterrestrials involved in abductions, doing things that are quite nasty, and that we should be very, very careful. We don't trust extraterrestrials, or in extreme cases, we regard them as demonic. And so the intelligence community has been doing this for a long time, and it's no surprise that the Patriot community has been infiltrated. People who have, by their own admission, been former CIA operatives who are now very prominent in the truther community, and they're giving airtime to people claiming that Elena Danaan has been murdered and replaced by a droid without any evidence. And these people go on to make all sorts of claims about extraterrestrials with zero evidence, and they're not challenged by the hosts. They're not vetted in any way. So, yeah, I think there is a coordinated psychological operation happening, and that needs to be exposed. Okay, so this is the final story. Well, not quite the final story, but the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office has just launched its official website with a lot of reports, summaries, etc., of UAPs. So former government military employees now will soon have the option of submitting their testimonies. They are setting this up so that current and former employees of the military, of the government, corporations can submit their testimonies on UAPs directly to the Arrow office. So will such testimonies be released to the public, or will they gather dust in a cabinet in a file cabinet given Sean Kirkpatrick's attitudes towards whistleblowers such as David Grusch. So I think the current head of the Arrow office has revealed himself to be a gatekeeper. I don't think he is very interested in revealing any of this evidence coming from whistleblowers concerning programs. So he's been put in that position, I think, as a gatekeeper. And of course, he has put out an article, made a statement directly attacking David Grusch. So, but nevertheless, a website has been just released. So exactly how effective will this website be? Well, here you have the director's message, Sean Kirkpatrick, the mission, the vision. It gives you some reporting trends, giving you a lot of statistics about UAPs. What are we talking about? Graphs and so forth about how many sightings there have been. Some of the statistics on what height, what locations. So this is what you can find on the Arrow website. And here you have coming soon, the US government UAP-related program, the activity reporting. So this is where whistleblowers at some point soon will be able to submit their testimony. Now, the question is, if Sean Kirkpatrick's just going to be a gatekeeper, what's the point of it? If he's just going to sit on whatever whistleblower testimonies are submitted, not release them to the general public, not forward them to the Congress, then why go through the process? Well, as I mentioned earlier, there is a struggle. Different factions are posturing for exactly how much information is going to be released. And so this takes me to the next story, which is okay, so here's a Pentagon press secretary, Air Force Brigadier General Pat Ryder. He gives a briefing to the media about the new Arrow office. So this goes for about 7 minutes. It was released by John Greenwald from the Black Vault, who does he's done thousands of FOIA requests, and he is very much a stickler for facts and details, which I think there's definitely importance we need to attach to being very factual and detail oriented in how we approach this UFO phenomenon. But it's part of the reality is that often there are facts and details that might not be available for some of these whistleblowers in making their comments or making their revelations, but that doesn't mean that their revelations should be dismissed or ignored, because as any good intelligence analyst will tell you, you look at all the sources of information and you give them weighting. So FOIA documents, very helpful. You can give them a certain weighting because these are very factual, very detail oriented. But then testimonies by whistleblowers, testimonies by insiders, contactee reports, all of these also are part of the equation. So the Pentagon Press Secretary, Air Force Brigadier General Pat Ryder briefs the media about the new Arrow office, the new Arrow website for reporting UAPs. So you can watch that. It goes for 7 minutes, just the clips where he talks about UAPs. Now, the thing that I found very interesting is that there is this, the Assistant Secretary of Defense, who is involved in the creation of this website, of this All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the the Deputy Secretary of Defense, so that's a very senior official in the Pentagon, has now taken over responsibility for the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which was previously reporting to the Undersecretary for Defense on security and intelligence, which is a kind of mid-level position in the Pentagon bureaucracy. And now the AARO office is reporting directly to Kathleen Hicks, who is the Deputy Secretary of Defense. So to my mind, that is a very positive development. It shows that people within the Congress recognized that mid-level bureaucrats were blocking genuine disclosures, and this is why the AARO office wasn't being very effective. And so people in the Congress mandated that now the Deputy Secretary of Defense, which is the second most powerful position in the Pentagon under the Secretary of Defense, would be responsible for the AARO office. And so Kathleen Hicks took credit for this UAP website being released. So I think that we are watching this kind of factional struggle between Congress and white hats within the Pentagon and the intelligence community against those within the intelligence community and the Pentagon that want to slow things down, that want to be gatekeepers and prevent all of this information from coming forward. So I think we're going to witness some pretty major events happening in September as this factional struggle continues to play out. I think the white hats are definitely in the ascension. They have succeeded in creating this office despite opposition. They have succeeded in having the UFO Disclosure Act for 2023 incorporated into the National Defense Authorization Act for 2024. And I think we're going to be witnessing international developments as well happening very, very soon. So that's it in terms of my Twitter feed for the week in review for September 2nd. I recommend you just go to twitter.com/Michael Sala to get all the references to the articles that I discussed. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the video platform that you're viewing this on, especially on YouTube, because YouTube is using shadow banning. My website my channel is being shadow banned, and the only way to overcome that is by having you, the viewer, recommend this video to others and like and sharing it. So thank you again for watching this and subscribing and supporting my research. And one announcement, I did have the audiobook version of US Army Insider Missions that I announced at the beginning of this week, as well as the Vimeo version or Vimeo recording of my last webinar, which is now available online. So you can go to my website to see those, or I'll have banners included in this at the end of this presentation. So thank you and aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics today with Dr. Michael Sala. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Sala. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.